This is Writer Life, a podcast about writing, life, coffee and conversation with Rob and John Morgan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Writer Life. Today I want to ask the question, is storytelling important? Because it's something that's occupied my thoughts for a little while, and I've considered it a great deal of late, triggered mainly by some conversations with a few people and stuff that I've read online. The way I see it, writing is like an illness, as is storytelling. It's like some sort of disease. Not sure how you catch it, you just do, and your life starts to change. There's an almost addictive state which we go to as we either write or slip between the covers of a book to read, and it's something so magical it's hard to imagine a life that no longer contains it. I've been absent on this channel for a little time, mainly because I was gripped by a single idea, and 20 chapters later I've completed writing one book and have slipped into a second book, and I'm actually 15 chapters in, with another wonderful story that's now playing in my mind like some sort of old movie. This is the writer's life. It has little to do with sales or shops. It's just a way of being, and it is an illness that can never be cured. I've been writing now for many years. I'm at my happiest when I'm alone with my thoughts, lost to a blank page, as I see the lines of words appear, while my mind races to get down what I'm currently imagining. I've got to confess, in all of that time I've never really sat back and considered what it is that I actually do. It just comes naturally to me. And so I've never really questioned it. Because, the way I see things, telling a story is as old as the hills. But recently I've spoken with a good few others, and I've begun to consider writing in ways that I've never really done so before. Life of late has not been easy for anybody. The virus of 2020, followed by the economic downturn, has left a lot of people struggling with little money, and certainly little time to read. Globally, over the last 2 decades, we've seen a few small peaks in the increase of readers, but the long-term outlook has been quite bleak, and more new generations are now growing up more interested in film than the writers that create them. Book reading is currently in a slump. New authors struggle, and the younger generations are just far more interested in gaming and watching things like Netflix and other streaming channels than actually lifting a book and sitting quietly alone reading. 2 months ago I asked myself a very serious question, or whether or not it was time to stop publishing my work, and doing as so many other people have told me many times in my life, which is to ditch full-time writing and get a proper job. It has got to me a great deal of late, as I've had to seriously evaluate my life and consider a life without a keyboard. I've asked myself many times, is there any point creating books if everybody's so engaged with other entertainments that they no longer wish to buy and read a paperback book? I'm sure many other writers have asked themselves the very same question since that awful virus of 2020. Because the world after that terrible 2 years has emerged as a very, very different sort of landscape to how it was before. Is storytelling still important? And is it even relevant today? I cannot deny there is a part of me that actually thinks it is. If anything, I would say it's probably far more important than most people today actually realise. Because you see, writing and storytelling is hidden for at least 90% of the time. It's one of those things that is kind of vital to productivity, and yet it is conducted out of sight by mainly nameless figures who push their brains to the limit in search of an almost mythical holy grail, which is that one tale that impacts on everyone. And it's not always conducted via books. And so I'll try my best to explain my reasoning behind that. 2024 actually sees the launch by the reading agency of the Summer Reading Challenge. This event is going to kick off this year on June the 22nd in Scotland and July the 6th in England, and it will have the theme of marvellous makers. It is a scheme that is targeted at kids, and it will be run through libraries and schools. And to be honest, this is something that I've always highly approved of, because reading can change the lives of children and introduce them to the larger world outside. It baffles me, to be honest, when I come across a parent who stares at me like I'm the devil when I ask them the simple question of if they encourage their children to read. They sort of stare at me and then tell me they themselves do not read, and so no, they do not encourage them. If I'm absolutely honest, a part of me wants to slap the shit out of them and scream at them, do you really, really want your children to grow up as narrow-minded and stupid as you are? My love of books really does force me to sort of get the better of me, and my temper shows. Because I cannot honestly believe a parent who doesn't want their children to do better than themselves. Reading has been proven to be massively important to the human body and mind. It helps children develop a stronger sense of self. They learn empathy and compassion, and it shows them how to really use their imagination in a much more creative way. Did you know that it can help fight off dementia? I mean, if you did not, I would say go and buy a book and start exercising your brain today. Reading is actually a neurobiological process that gives your brain a workout. It allows the muscles to be worked like the muscles of the arm in a gymnasium, and it strengthens brain activity. As you do so, you can help to slow down cognitive decline and even decrease the rate at which memory starts to fade. Scientists at the University of California at Berkeley have even found that reading reduces the level of beta amyloid, which is a protein in the brain that is connected to Alzheimer's. Who knew that reading could have physical, psychological, and spiritual benefits? Well, we all do now. Now, obviously, in order to read, we must first create the story, which is a magical thing of words strung in a line on a page that transports the mind of the reader into a rich tapestry of days long past, or different lands filled with adventure, all magically gathered together by the wordsmith, a simple being with a brain on fire that lives off the joy of assembling the words in a coherent fashion. They have one aim, nothing more, and that is to delight and ignite the mind of the reader and take them on a journey without ever leaving the place that they sit in. In truth, the storyteller is one of the most important and yet seldom seen members of our modern community, for they are the magicians who work to delight our dreams, but are often isolated figures, caught out by their inspiration, and so seclude themselves in order to create the words that will influence not just readers, but watchers and listeners alike. We know that reading helps children to better understand and use language. Their choice of words helps them to blend better within groups, and the more they read, the more adaptable they become at fitting in with different types of social groups within our society. It is a well-known fact that what words we use when talking can express ourselves and our points of view much more adequately, and children who learn these gifts early have a better chance of being accepted by many of the different types of social groups from all of the different types of social settings we now have within society. It is a well-researched fact that children who read do better academically, which leads to a greater sense of inner security and raises the confidence of the individual. It also allows them to be more creative and express not only themselves, but the feelings and emotions of others. It stands to reason that if reading is this beneficial to children, then surely it is as equally beneficial to adults. Now at this point, I think we have to ask the question, why is that? The best way I can explain this is possibly through a conversation I had recently about audiobooks. You know, when you consider that most of the world has become visual now, we like to watch movies, listen to podcasts, go to plays and observe. You know, the person in question who I had the conversation with had listened to an audio version of a book I had read, and yet they missed out on the subtle aspects of the plot and the humour within the story, and I quickly picked up on that. It has been my experience that when we sit and we listen to something, especially a book, just as we would a podcast like this one, our minds to a degree disengage. Sitting and listening is a whole different experience to actually reading the words and turning the pages. Listening tends to move us more towards a relaxed state, to a degree where we're disengaged from the actual process as our minds wander more into a state of ultra relaxation and rest. Therefore, as we listen, we do not fully concentrate on the story as maybe we would if we engaged in the reading process. When we hold a book physically and we read each word, we're far more stimulated because we're physically engaging with not just the book, but also with the story. As we read, we picture the scene, the characters, the events as they unfold, and through that process, as our minds fill with the images that we actually create related to the story in our thoughts, we also find ourselves slipping deeper into what is a much more immersive process, and that stimulates our emotional selves. We're no longer sat relaxed and listening to the words being read to us. Inside, our minds are more alive than ever as we focus on the page and hang on each word, and our feelings flow through a series of differing emotional states. The stimulation to the body, mind, and spirit, to a degree, is far greater than that of simply listening. We may know the story by sitting and listening to it being read to us, but when we actually read the words on the page, different senses are activated with every single word, and our brain is far more active. And the main difference for this is because we focus on the story in a much different way, and through that we start to drift and begin to live the story in our hearts and minds. I like to think that it's possibly, why dedicated readers always state that they live in a book. Because in a sense, albeit on an emotional and spiritual plane, they actually do. I think it is really, really important to understand that we are, as a race of humans, social beings. For millennia, we've gathered together and expressed ourselves via many different means of entertainment, be it music, dancing, or in this particular case, storytelling. Each has a significant impact on the growth of mankind, and I would say none more than the spoken word. If you want to express music, you can add the words and sing to it. Or if you wish to learn a tale and never forget it, then you have the means to write it down, remember it, and then speak it out loud to an audience. The art of storytelling is ancient. It stretches back deep into the past of mankind and has been used as a means of influence, teaching, and inspiration of every culture. The ability to tell a story, sit and read, or listen to one, has shaped the thoughts of mankind for every generation, passing backwards into the very distant past. It has been the means to convey culture, history, and the values of the society within which it has been based, and it has been a vital source for uniting people and building the bonds that is forged between them. The history of our people, or even our race, is littered with amazing tales of brave deeds and harsh struggles. And it all adds to the patchwork of a life that's been lived over many generations that takes us back to the time before words were even written. In Africa, tribes had travelling storytellers who would sit and recite every significant moment of a tribe's history. In many cases, they could quote complete family lines. When you read the book Roots, that was written by Alex Haley, he writes a beautiful moment where suddenly he realizes that the tribesman is talking about his own family line. And through the story, he discovers the truth of his family's past lineage. The story Alex tells us is a true story. It happened to him as he sought the African side of his once enslaved relative. And such is the power of this story. It became a best-selling book and TV series during the 1970s. I read the book when I was at school, and it's a story that has stayed with me ever since. Such was the power of the tale that Alex told. Celtic history is the very same. Very little was written by the Celts, but much was learned and passed down from father to son as tales of brave ancestors. And the telling of these tales was an important aspect of tribal life back in the days before the Christians took control of the British Isles. I find it all fascinating that across every single continent, it is a well-known fact that the telling of tales is what kept alive the vibrant customs and cultures of all our indigenous people on the planet. I think that storytelling is important. I think it's possibly one of the most important aspects of our modern civilized culture today. And teaching our children to read and write has to be the most important thing that we can do for them. The storyteller of old was the modern equivalent of what is seen today as the mobile library. They would visit each village or town and give away their stories as the community sat listening in awe, and the past of their people was given back to them from the mind and the voice of the storyteller. There was a time in this world when we understood this and ensured that our race stayed informed, because we insisted children were taught to read properly, and every parent would make sure that children had access to books via a library card. My mother would hand us our cards and tell us, "Go out and get 2 books each." She knew that was the place where we would dream and discover new worlds filled with adventure. But we would also discover the answers to everything we questioned. Sadly, modern parents now tell their children, "Oh, just Google it." I feel Ray Bradbury said it best when he stated, "Without libraries, what have we? We have no past and no future." I always considered storytelling as a form of magic. One good tale can cast a spell on the listener and hold them captivated in a trance-like state as they smile and live purely in the moment. There are internet gurus by the million today who tell people, in order to enjoy your life, you must be present in the moment. That translates in my brain to simply go sit and read a book. Because reading creates the situation where your only option is to be present in every second and each word that you consume. Albert Einstein once said, "The only thing you absolutely have to know is the location of the library." And when I read that as a child, it completely blew my mind. Because for me, at that time in my life, that was actually the treasure trove that contained all of the stories that I wanted to read. The library was, to my younger self, for me at least, my utopia. Kurt Vonnegut once said, "I believe that reading and writing are the most nourishing forms of meditation anyone has so far found. By reading the writings of the most interesting minds in history, we meditate with our own mind and theirs as well. To me, this is a miracle." I really believe he was right. There's something profound from being able to sit and enter the mind of William Shakespeare, who sat alone hundreds of years ago as he wrote his stories to share with the world. Even today, his words still have power over the emotions of people who he's never really met or ever spoken to. And yet, by lifting the cover, you can enter his world and relive the life that he saw all around him. That truly is a miraculous thing. Just like ancient times, Shakespeare shares his stories like the weary Celt or African tribesman in theatres all over the world, where people gather in large numbers to hear the sacred words of this immortal writer spoken out loud to the masses. The physical figure of Shakespeare is no more. He is but dust, long since buried, and yet his mind and his heart live on in the words that he left on the pages he wrote, and he gave that to the world to be read for eternity. How many sci-fi movies have we seen where some mad scientist preserves his brain in a bubbling jar of liquid to continue on in life and create havoc and chaos? I've always smiled at this notion that this is a fantasy and something otherworldly that will one day be achieved as part of a cutting-edge technological future. I mean, if you think about it, hell, Shakespeare did it hundreds of years ago with little more than a quill, ink, and some parchment. The power of words and the stories that are created with them are timeless. Just like the words spoken 1,000 years ago by the Celts, which now can be read in collections of translated and written tales such as the Mabinogion, and the writings of Alex Haley in Roots, where he picked up on the story of Kunta Kinte after he was captured in Africa and taken to the United States. Where the African storytellers end, Alex Haley continues on a written tradition of what was once a spoken tale. It's an endless cycle, as each year more and more stories are added to the ever-growing pile, inspiring others to take up the baton and continue forward with what is one of the oldest traditions now of mankind, which is the art of crafting a story worth telling and a story worth listening to. There was a time when a good tale was only told through the spoken word. But like all things in our journey over time, it evolved into the art of crafting books. In today's modern world, the storytellers are very, very varied, and yet they're still the unseen figures behind many aspects of our modern world and life. Computer games are built on a storyline crafted by a writer around which the game is developed. You may not see it or even understand it, but all of you who have given up books and reading to plug into a game, you're actually still at the mercy of a very good writer who has crafted the fantasy in which you will log in and play. The same can be said for that group of people who come under the banner of, "I would rather watch the movie." They may lose the full depth of the story as a whole, because films have to edit so much of a good story to fit it into the screening time. But the viewer sat in their seat eating popcorn has still been seduced by the art of storytelling as they watch the work of some hidden screenwriter who crafts the right words and the right moments to make the film as close to the book as possible. In many cases, without the book, without the storyteller, there would be no film. I smile as I once remember a friend telling me of their joy at playing the Harry Potter computer game and how it was so like the movie. It really made me laugh. The game was just an over-edited series of moments from the movie, and it lost a great deal of the book in its transition from pages to computer game. He praised the film so much, it was actually almost sad that he hadn't read the books and seen how deep and wonderful the books actually were. I don't think watching the film he would ever feel the same depth of emotion as those readers who fell in love with the stories and lived through the moments with Harry and so forth. Just a week ago, I read an article stating that children's books should be shorter. And I thought, how that is so wrong. How will we continue to keep the truth of the storytellers alive if we keep teaching our children that everything needs to be edited into sound bites and shortened? That's not storytelling. Hell, it's not even reading properly. A good book, should be as big and as long as the depth of the tale it contains. And in a sense, it should not be easy to read. Reducing the time to read a book is no different from a game or a film. Should authors edit out half of their tale for no other reason than it does not suit the modern ideals of convenience? I think not. It is good at times to struggle. It's actually how we learn. And if the story is good and it takes a while to fully understand it, then that should be all the better, as it makes the story more worthy of the telling and certainly makes for a much better book. The best stories cannot be told in an hour. In Africa in the past, the storytellers could talk for days, telling the whole of the story and noting every action in detail. And so, shouldn't a good book do the same? Or even a film for that matter? Peter Jackson understood this when he created what became the extended film cuts of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Because he knew the secret of storytelling, and he understood the importance of making sure the story was told in the right fashion. And he did not do that by making a 40-minute movie. Even a good gaming experience can last for a week. And so should a really good book. So, I ask, is storytelling important? Is it even relevant today? These two questions have preoccupied my thoughts recently, because there really is no doubt that a great many people are now resistant to reading, and children are slipping through the net and not reading enough books, but would rather be cruising social media and gaming. The percentage of people who would rather see the movie is far higher now than those who would read the book. And so, from a writer of book sense, the future does look difficult, but I don't think that it's impossible. My biggest problem with films today is actually the lack of decent dialogue. Too many films cut back the writer and push forward the special effects. Films are now far more visual, and the audio is mainly filled with explosions, gunshots, and screams than intimate conversations and good discord. I'm actually a huge fan of Japanese anime. I love that Japan has a culture that fosters storytelling and also will tackle just about any subject to create a really good story around it. The Japanese are fearless. They create animations for all ages, from the young to the very old. And recently I found the depth and skill of their storylines to be absolutely inspiring. I think I can say the same for South Korea, which I was introduced to recently, as it produces very high quality films that focus on acting skills and great dialogue. And the way in which they create and build a suspenseful storyline is simply beautiful and very, very skillful writing. I'm happy to say that whilst the Western world staggers and stumbles with special effects laden movies, in the East there are some real gems to be discovered, and the industry is thriving with some of the best storytelling that I've ever witnessed in my life. The West does have its gems, and occasionally something profound and written with great skill is produced. But here on the Western side, I still feel the real spirit of storytelling lies in the hands of what are now independent writers. I feel the publishing industry is still the bastion of great stories. There are some very talented, undiscovered authors out there who are crafting some magnificent tales. And my advice to everybody would be, go hunting. Go buy a book and try reading something that engages your mind, heart, and soul. I still feel the book is still the best way to conduct storytelling. I would absolutely encourage everybody to read a story out loud to a friend or a partner or family member. And I think that reading is still the best way to engage with stories. For writers and publishers alike, the book is a sacred thing and something to be treated with great reverence and respect. Modern times make it hard to live as a writer. Things have not changed a great deal since Charles Dickens wrote his tales of a poverty-stricken London. But when we live in a land where libraries have been closed and shut down for years, which is what's happened in the UK because local councils direct money into other projects, and bookshops fall to the power and the might of global giant companies retailing books, it really does make it harder to push the value of reading where there's no convenient bookshop to visit and spend some time browsing. I feel that there is a real need to reconsider storytelling and reading, especially for the young, and in things like the Reading Agency's Summer Reading Challenge. I think there's a need for all of us to give them all the support that we can. My childhood was enriched by stories. The stories I read, they amazed me and inspired me. And to a degree, that has helped me through life as I gain the skills to communicate effectively, simply by learning from book characters. The importance of reading, especially to children, is not stressed enough in our schools or by our governments, who really do need to do more, especially in regard to improving libraries. And rather than reducing their book stocks, they should be increasing them. Parents, teachers, and public figures should do more to show children that there is more to life than the virtual killing of their friends in an online game, or watching streamers and influencers make videos with no real value to their content. Books need to be seen and be offered so children can see them more often. My town used to have 4 bookshops, which I visited often. I spent a fortune in them growing up. But now, sadly, they are gone. They are the victims of the giant corporations. And even the supermarkets, which did to a degree replace them, have now reduced their stock to the 10 best sellers. It's a very sad state of affairs and has played its part in the demise of reading and the demise of storytelling. My favourite things in the world are the smell of a new book lifted out of the packaging, but more importantly, walking around a second-hand bookstore, taking in the view of all of the covers and lifting the books, feeling them, reading the blurb as I hunt for something to captivate me and transport me to a different world with a different life, and all done without ever leaving my chair. Storytelling is important. It plays such a huge role in our life that we do not even realize it. The written word is man's greatest achievement, and I feel after a great deal of thought, storytelling and reading is needed more now than ever before, and therefore it's far more relevant than even I realized when I began my search to create this podcast episode. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope that it, to a degree, has inspired you to really sit back and think. And, if you know children or you interact with children, find out if they're reading enough. And, if you're giving a gift, buy them a great book that they can read and try and get them into understanding the power of storytelling. I will be back next week with another episode, and I hope it'll be something that will challenge you, make you think, make you consider your own life and the lives of others around you. Until then, I will say goodbye, and thank you very, very much for listening to me today.
Thanks for listening to the Writer Life podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, or there are areas of Robin's stories you would like him to discuss, please add your thoughts and questions in the comments, and we will include them in a future episode. You can follow Robin on all his social media links, which you will find listed below, and please, like and subscribe to this channel, so you get the latest notifications when he posts. All Robin's books are available in digital and print formats to purchase or download through all online book sales sites.